Okay, everybody, the next part of our presentation is a panel around digital transformation. I have longer intros of each of these guys, but I'm going to let them introduce themselves in the interest of time. So starting with Gary.
After last year, I'm not touching the bottom of my. My name is Gary Burgle. I'm the regional CTO for Hewlett Packard Enterprise. I'm responsible for all the product lines across the Americas.
Hi, Vinay Nichani here. I lead software sales globally for Cisco. I live in Irvine, Southern California, born and bred.
Thank you.
Doj Willie, CEO of Zentors. We're a digital transformation company focused on DevOps, cloud, and big data. And we are helping Ensys 360 build their digital transformation practice.
Al Solorzano, practice manager for end user computing at Ensys 360. Woo! By the way, I have no idea how my bio got so long on the agenda, so that's long.
Hello again, everyone. Kurt Romer, Chief Security Strategist for Citrix.
Awesome, thanks, guys. So to kick it off, Anoj, there have been a lot of companies that have used a lift and shift approach to go into the public cloud. What are the issues with that, and how does a hybrid cloud DevOps approach help with that?
Okay, so when we see folks going into a hybrid cloud approach or even a public cloud approach, you sort of see them in three phases. And the first phase is, hey, like you mentioned, Mike, how do I lift and shift? How do I move some applications? And they're sort of experimenting in the cloud. So from that perspective, when you're in that stage one, we really emphasize taking an application-centric approach, understanding what the applications look like, how they interact, and the complexities around that, and then sort of experimenting in AWS or Azure or your cloud of choice, and then starting that migration. When you get to the second stage, though, and this is where we're seeing a lot of companies today, is they've already gone heavily into the cloud. They've already tried a bunch of stuff in AWS and Azure, but now they're looking at things like cost optimization, and they're looking at other things as like, how do I service my customer, right? A service provider, I talk about it, has a different mentality than an enterprise. A service provider is like Taco Bell, for instance. You go to Taco Bell and say, hey, I want burgers. They say, no, sorry, we don't do that, right? You go to Wendy's for burgers. When you're an enterprise, you can't do that. It's almost like you're inviting people over for dinner. You can't say, hey, we're serving steak. Sorry, you're a vegetarian. You don't get to eat, right? So you have to kind of solve it for them. But there's a mix there in the middle where you have to figure out what model is best for your company. The third phase, where we see actually the most advanced companies, we're helping companies today, is when companies really get to this idea called cost to serve, this technology business management. So I'm really out of the business of operating servers and things like that, and really I really want to find out is how much does it cost to launch this service? Like if you put a workload in Amazon, you can say, hey, this thing is costing me $10,000 a month. How much value am I getting for that? You can make that equation, that analysis. If you go to an IT director and you say, how much does it cost to onboard a user? They're like, gosh, I don't know, it depends, right? So we've got to move past that. One of the best examples I can give is LinkedIn. Actually, they know how much a specific profile costs. They will tell you it's $17 a year for every profile they hold. So if you go to them to sell them some kind of technology, they're going to ask you, how does your technology help me lower my cost to serve? And actually, Cisco's doing a really good job with that as well. They've kind of consolidated their data centers under Sidney Morgan, and they're doing a phenomenal job around that cost to serve and that understanding.
Cool. Vinay, how is Cisco, speaking of which, using outcome-based solutions approach to help customers on this journey?
Yeah, it's a great question, right? We've seen a definite shift in IT, to Anoj's point, to that focus on outcomes. And I think that's where, it starts with, and this is a bigger conversation on digitization that we're going to get to, it starts with understanding your customer's customer, right? And how are they engaging with those customers, and how are they using digitization to drive a shift in that interaction, to drive more value interaction as one side of it, and on the other side of it, how are they using technology to get more efficient from an operational perspective? From there, the common threads you're usually going to find in that are that, and it's the same thing that drives cloud, is we want more simplicity, more flexibility, more speed. And so from a technology perspective, when you look across architectures, what we're fundamentally doing, the common thread, is building more agile platforms for digitization, right? Whether you talk about the digital network architecture on campus routing and switching and how we deliver more automation and analytics at scale, at speed, for infrastructure, whether you go into the data center and talk about what we're doing with some of our advanced applications to more easily manage workloads between clouds, to more easily automate how you do those manual tasks, or in the security space where so much of it is built on cloud-based machine intelligence analytics to recognize and respond to threats in an automated way. Take the manual process out of it so that you can fundamentally be more agile in delivering those outcomes.
Just as part of the rules of engagement here, if anybody else wants to add in before I move on to the next question.
I think everybody owes $1 every time they say agile. Just saying.
So what am I at, 20?
I already told Tom this was coming, so. Okay, since you spoke up, I'm picking on you next. Al, at Enesys, we have developed hybrid cloud, VDI, or digital workspace solutions. What challenges have customers faced, and how are we overcoming them?
So first thing, just so everybody knows, the workspace cloud offering that NSP has built is really designed to deliver desktops as a service with a full managed service. I think that's a key differentiator. I think what we're seeing for a lot of the DaaS offerings that are out there today, what they're missing is the key components of flexibility and the components of managed services. So really quick, flexibility. Our solution is designed to run on any cloud that you may have, whether that's a public, private, or a hybrid model. This also integrates with the Citrix solutions in their stack, along with a lot of other components to make sure that they deliver a fully capable solution that's pretty flexible, whether you want to have it in your data center or somebody else's data center, or you just want to have a colo offering. So there's definitely a flexible solution there. And then the managed services. I think that's a big key piece. Most of the DaaS solutions will go ahead and say, here's your desktop, and that's it, right? It's up to you as IT to go ahead and figure out, well, how do I get my applications installed? How do I deliver the profile management component? So our managed services offering, which has been running for quite some time now, has go ahead and deliver that for Sutter and for others, but is actually part of our solution to deliver a much better experience.
But does it help you be more agile?
Absolutely.
You all. Remember, I own the seating chart for tonight. Kurt, there's been a lot of changes at Citrix lately. Talk a little bit about Citrix's philosophy on the cloud and where they think customers are going. And then if they're there, we all know you access through a browser, and since you're owning the security side of it, what your thoughts are around all that.
Yeah, thanks. In terms of Citrix, we're definitely pivoting very heavily to cloud. We're hearing loud and clear from our customers that they've got a lot of the on-premises solutions solved, and as they're moving into Windows 10 Creators Edition and others, they want to be able to deliver those to a more simplified endpoint, and they want to simplify the back-end services as well by putting them in the cloud, being able to subscribe to it as a service, and being able to deliver that across the world. Now, on-premises still needs to be there as well. There are a lot of solutions that need to be able to run disconnected from the internet and would not be worthy of putting out in the cloud at this point in time. So we need to be able to support both. And in terms of publishing applications, desktops, being able to publish data out there, we also have to keep in mind that we're focusing now more on workspaces. And a workspace is not just a desktop. A desktop can be a workspace, but workspaces are going to continue to evolve so that they're more of how we work, how we produce our work products, how we do things. And instead of you coming in the morning and having to open certain apps and go out and search for certain news or certain data, your workspace is really going to present to you those things that are most relevant. And it's going to learn from you over time what you're interested in, what you should be interested in, because some of us have picked up bad habits over the years, and help to recommend more of what we need to do to be more productive and more secure. And that concept of workspaces is something that we all need to be playing out much more.
I'm sorry. How many people believe they have their on-premises solution fully working and vetted? Right. I think what I'm seeing from a lot of our customers these days is they're looking at the cloud as being trying to fix the problem. Right. They're just shove everything out there, like we talked about the lift and shift. And I don't think that's necessarily true. I think what's happening is the hybrid model, right, where they want to figure out where things make sense. And so I think that's really where we're trying to see our focus on.
Yeah, that's definitely a factor here. What we're seeing though as well is there are a lot of businesses that are going, hey, I'm having a really hard time finding the talent to build and manage this and secure this. And it really doesn't make sense for me to invest in that anymore because I'm not an infrastructure services company. I need somebody to be doing that for us. And that's where Enesys comes into play, and that's where some companies are just going direct to cloud for their solutions, particularly some of the SMBs as well. And you see that with Amazon Workspaces and other products out there. We're going to have a lot of things we're dealing with, and remember, we'll be integrating those from an M&A perspective as we acquire different companies and divest and work with different organizations. So there will be a myriad and quite a diversity of solutions out there. I think you also had a question about the browser. From a browser perspective, we've got a lot of resources on being able to secure the published and hosted browser and how you should be thinking about the endpoint browser security, where a hosted browser comes into play, and being able to do that for consistency, being able to do that to be much more specific to the needs of an application, locking it down to only the plugins that are needed, only the domains that it should be communicating with. But one other huge use case there is if you have anybody who is a privileged user or an admin, make sure that you're publishing browsers for them. So your admin doesn't go in with their domain join laptop, connect up to the network, go out on Facebook, their personal email, and be connected to all your company systems across the domain and have something bad happen to them. Your admins need to be more segmented and isolated, particularly by publishing browsers, than probably anybody else in the organization. Any disagreement there?
So just to go back to one of the main tenets for today, it's for us, everybody knows we can install, design, support Citrix systems. But for our customers now, a major part of what our focus is isn't convincing you to go to the cloud, but helping you figure out that journey, and to Wes's point, helping you get started.
Yeah, and it's kind of where cloud makes sense, because it doesn't make sense in all cases, absolutely. But where it does make sense, it can be the lowest cost, highest performing option, and as Wes had hinted to before, definitely brings some security options that many businesses cannot afford. The security teams that are saying, I can do this better than everybody else, there are a few of those out there. Those are few and far between these days.
Okay, so moving along, Gary. You ready? All right. With developments like composable infrastructure and HP Synergy, how is HPE creating platforms that change the way we compute and support the things we're talking about?
So first of all, the HPE swear jar is nimble, synergy, and agile. And so we bought nimble and we built synergy. So my swear jar is pretty big in that regard. So as we were starting to look at what the next generation of technology was, obviously if you look at HPE right now, we've kind of done a lot of work to make ourselves more nimble. See, there it is. And as we were looking at what the market was going to be, we started looking at what the next generation architectures were. We started with a project called The Machine, which is around memory-based compute versus compute leading to memory. And then we decided we were going to start to build a more flexible infrastructure that could be delivered with a single line of code. That was the underlying principle behind when we built Synergy. And we knew that from our own dealing with the cloud, fun fact, we used to have 128 instances of PeopleSoft. Now we have 1 instance of Workday. Right? So as we were building these environments out, we experienced the same pain all our customers did. And so we wanted to deliver a system that would allow us to expand the performance on the fly, change the configurations on the fly, but also lead to what the machine promises, which is we do a lot with DreamWorks as an example. They manage to the core. So they run an average of 25,000 cores at a given time, but they need to scale 10,000 cores up and down depending on what they're doing. We want to be able to be the flexible engine that provides that capability, but make it easy to use. And then on top of everything else, provide customer choice. So if you look at the divestitures we've done around our software division and things like that, it doesn't matter which one of the platforms you choose as your on-site solution. We're going to work with you on that. It won't matter what that is because we share a common API. So we're trying to make the experience as simple as possible and bring customer choice back to one vendor not owning every single piece of the equation, but actually partnering well with all of them.
Awesome. Great. Vinay, what new licensing models are addressing the same problems, and how are they changing the way we deliver computing?
Yeah, it's so you've seen in the last few years, right? I think back to that Bill Gates quote, 2 years versus 10, right? You've seen a lot of technological innovation, but it's also been mind-boggling how quickly licensing and consumption models have evolved to fundamentally give customers more flexibility. And I do think that started with cloud, right? And there's a lot of reasons customers went to cloud, but one of the fundamental financial reasons was the ability to pay for what you consume and not pay for what you don't. I don't have to build for a peak that most of the time I'm not going to utilize, right? And I think you've seen that philosophy start to permeate beyond cloud into software and now hardware licensing models, right? In terms of, you take an example, on our side with Meraki, how we deliver cloud managed infrastructure. You buy the box, but really the intelligence is in the software that's delivered as a service, and you access via web portal. You don't worry about versioning and patching and updating, and it's just an easy button through an easy licensing model that allows you to pay for what you use in a very simple way. And you see that evolving now, where some vendors are offering hardware as a subscription, right? And we were having this discussion with somebody earlier, and the discussion was, well, how is that different than a lease? Well, within that subscription, we can actually offer you ongoing innovation in terms of new platforms periodically as they come out, and that's something we're absolutely going down the path of. And then you look at where we've started to go with our enterprise agreement model, allowing customers to pick what they want out of our different portfolios, package one agreement around that, and with an enterprise commitment, offer growth potential, offer innovation capabilities, and just give more value and more simplicity to our customers in terms of how they manage all the complexity that used to be in the traditional licensing model.
Awesome. Anoj, we've talked about this at length, and we're still figuring this out, or at least I think I am, but I think we all are. When we perform digital transformation workshops around DevOps and big data, we deal with the impact on the customer's organization and culture. What is the biggest challenge there, and how do we at least begin to overcome it?
Sure. So I ran cloud and high performance computing for a large pharmaceutical out here in LA, and also for a venture capital company. And I will tell you, the hardest machine to upgrade is the human being, right? So the technology part of this is easy. It's the cultural change that you really hit up on. So there's actually two big challenges we had. One is, I would say, is adoption. So I know, Wes, your whole thing was, hey, build it and they will come. The flip side of that is, look, we've all been in a company that had a wiki or a SharePoint or Quad that was built and never used, right? And that's not because it wasn't technically built properly, it's because we didn't know how to drive adoption to that, right? Did that actually change your experience? I mean, I'm willing to bet most of the people in the audience have a number of home services like Dropbox or Mint.com or Gmail, Hotmail. When was the last time you logged into Mint.com to check what your financial statements look like? And so we have a lot of services that we use, and people are kind of pushing new things, but a lot of times, like, how do we drive adoption? So one of the things we do, we do this workshop. We kind of call it the date before the engagement. It's a one-day thing where you can select and curate topics and kind of customize a workshop, whether it's in DevOps or cloud or big data. And we really just meet up with your folks, and so you get to know us, we get to know you, and we really dig into kind of what is it you're trying to solve, right? And a lot of times when we approach these problems, people are approaching them from a technology perspective. You're not going to convince an architect like, hey, VMware is better than OpenStack. They're going to fight that battle to the death, right? Where you will get agreement, though, is, hey, what are the use cases that are actually going to move your organization forward, right? Like instant data environment or automated employee onboarding. Those things you can actually get agreement around and get alignment. And so the biggest thing we actually find out in organizations is it's actually alignment, right? It's just getting all the leaders to agree on, hey, this is the path that we're going to go down. Because if the leaders don't agree, then everybody else is left to fight bloody, unwinnable battles. And so one of the things we start off with is, hey, can we align around something? And just going, I'm picking on Wes here, but mainly because he's on his phone. But but when what showed up there that the two models of building, we're not going to go in and build some big battleship. Those days are over, right? We're not going to go and gather all the requirements and say, wow, here, let's figure out all the features. Because you don't go to a restaurant because it has the most items on the menu. That's not why you go there. You go there for an experience, right? And hey, can I get a better experience? And so what we do is, how do we get that quick win? Like, let's identify that 1 or 2 use case, get that quick win, and off the velocity of that, now we can grow. If you think about it, that's how Amazon started. Amazon started with one service, S3. 4 years later, they released EC2. But in those 4 years, they figured out the experience, like who are our consumers? Okay, they're developers. How do we build them? How do we do reconciliation, customer service? Once they figure that out, look at the velocity at which they pop out services today. Now they're pushing services out like every 2 to 3 months, right? And so this is really what we espouse with companies. Launch those first couple of services, right? Get that experience, get that feedback, and then build upon that.
Great. Okay, we have about 10 minutes left, so we're really getting to the good stuff now. Does anyone else want to weigh in on that, actually? It's a huge topic. You good? All right. Al, based on what you have seen, are we ready, or that you have seen we are ready, when appropriate, to put desktops in Azure or AWS? I didn't ask that right. But, okay, if so, what are the good use cases?
I think Kurt kind of nailed it earlier when he says, when, that makes sense. That's an important piece. Real quick, before I go any further, I will say on one thing for Anoj. I've seen a lot of good pieces of information come out of those workshops. I've actually taken that on our side too, from a VDI perspective, and we're doing the same approach from a VDI approach. So we're doing the same thing. We're looking for the small wins that can get the momentum going, aligning the groups together and getting them moving in the right direction, because we see that often with a lot of our VDI projects, right? It's the infrastructure team that's not super excited to do something. Well, there's other ways of solving that problem, and we just need to move forward. So thank you for that, by the way. Back to the use cases. Definitely disaster recovery makes a lot of sense, right? As we said, consume when you need it. If you don't need it, then don't use it. So disaster recovery is an easy win. Of course, burst, right? It's everything what the cloud was meant for. So anybody that needs any burst use cases. Now, when it comes to just general virtualization and putting the workloads of VDI in the cloud, definitely there are some caveats that you got to worry about. I think networking is, of course, a big one. The performance of the applications, right? Where now it's not your data center anymore with the Citrix servers or the VDI infrastructure sitting right next to it. It's the VDI is running in Azure, and then you have your workloads and your applications, are running on premises. So definitely work into how those applications are going to perform. Do some validation, do some testing, do some POCs, and as your workloads migrate into Azure and migrate into the cloud, definitely you'll be able to take advantage of those applications much faster by having VDI in the cloud already there.
I'm going to add one thing to that, and when you take a look at getting out and talking to people about this, you have to actually show them what's going on. And we talk about proof of concepts, and you actually mentioned POC. I would say don't do proof of concepts anymore. Just completely leave that out of the equation. Do a proof of experience. A proof of concept is not good enough anymore these days. You have to actually show the experience. So think proof of experience and go there first. It'll be transformational.
Yeah, I do have something to say about the proof of experience. So, especially when it comes to the security side, it's funny when we talk about security, because originally we used to think about it, and I think you brought this up, Kurt, is a perimeter, right? A castle with a moat around it, and those are our firewall rules, essentially, and you let the drawbridge down for specific things that are coded in your rules. That was great when we had everything in the castle, right? But now things are all over the place, and so I don't have just an application in my data center. An application is not a monolithic thing, it's a constellation of a lot of things, and so it's moving around, and it's in cloud, it's in your private data center, etc. And so we're moving to this new kind of equation for securing our applications and our data. But I think one thing that gets overlooked with security, and when I talk to most security professionals, is the experience. Right, so think about this, like you guys have all taken flights here in the past month. I'm sure the TSA is the worst security experience I've ever gone through, right? Like they want to pat you down, make you take off your clothes, blah, blah, blah. It's a horrible experience, and it's not even very secure, right? Versus going into a casino where I can go and gamble, do whatever I want, but the moment I step out of line, you know, 2 guys in black suits are going to come and escort me off the premises, right? So that's really what you want security for your users to be like. It's almost like an open casino. You can go and do what you need to do as a user, but once somebody or something steps out of line, then it's automatically taken down, right, in a code-like way.
So our final question, 2 minutes each, guys, for Gary and Vinay, starting with Gary. Gary, you're a chief technologist for HP, meaning most of his days are spent with customers talking through their challenges. As from what you see in those conversations, what are the top challenges and how are you helping customers overcome that?
Well, I think one of the biggest challenges that we're all going to have as IT organizations today is the legacy things that you have seem to be forgotten by analysts and people who are trying to help you. And so I've had a lot of conversations, even with some of you in the room, about how do you bring some of your people up into more architectural roles, because the challenge is if you still have legacy infrastructures, the Zillennials with an X back there, I got to give you the shout out, right? Those guys don't want to work on legacy transition projects. So having your experienced individuals help with what that infrastructure plan looks like, what the cloud management plan looks like, how you're going to transition to the cloud is really, really key. The other part of the equation is, as you start looking at a more hybrid model, is really deep down looking at what you're going to do. I'll give you our interpretation from our IT staff. As we look at new applications, we have a simple rule. It's zero customization. So as you start to deliver your new applications, don't be, sorry SAP, the SAPs of 10 years ago where you spend $3 million delivering against what the client experience looks like when 90% of the way is the right way to go for your organization, and then drag that person kicking and screaming that wants the other 10% to legal or HR or whoever it is that needs that functionality to be approved, and get that out of the way, make your infrastructure cleaner that way.
30 seconds. Oh, same question to you. We have in meeting with clients, what are some of the biggest challenges they have, and how are we overcoming them? So
Yes, I'm going to give you a totally not technical answer to that, right? I'm going to come back to digitization, which is probably one of the penalty buzzwords of the day. But I think that what we see is, you know, everybody's trying to figure out how to move to the new world. And that means changing the customer experience and changing how you deliver value around technology. And with that, what I see across companies, Cisco included, is that actually drives a massive shift in how you run your business, right? So if I go from, you know, parallel to the IT example, if I go from big, one-time, periodic transactions to more frequent interactions, microtransactions, smaller interactions, smaller dollar amounts, more frequent, that wreaks havoc on how I recognize revenue, how I develop products and services, how I structure incentives, how I run my systems, IT systems, financial systems, and that's a massive transition that ripples throughout an organization and has implications far beyond IT that I just see companies trying to navigate left and right in a big way. And so I think that's something that, again, it's a bigger than IT conversation, but if I had to bet, a lot of your companies are probably navigating those waters and solving IT problems within that lens and with connection to the broader framework, I think is a huge opportunity for all of us.
Thank you. Everybody, please thank our panelists. Their time is amazing, and the fact that they made the time to come speak to us is always a pleasure. Thanks, guys.